Big thanks to Super Rare Games and In Resin for the review copy. After a great few months of releases for 3D platformers, the genre feels more alive than ever. Gecko Gods hopes to continue this trend and meaningfully contribute to the genre, and I'm glad to report that despite a few missteps, it manages to have its own unique voice with its exploration and puzzle-based gameplay. As the title would imply, Gecko Gods has you controlling an unnamed gecko. Unlike other platformers, your gecko is not anthropomorphic, it's actually a zoomorphic gecko, which means it's just a regular old gecko. This ends up being one of the game's strongest points, thanks to how the developers essentially based the entire game around the experience of actually being a gecko. And I know it's a meme to say, it makes you feel like Spider-Man, but this game actually does a good job of making you feel like a gecko. From the moment you start the game, you have the ability to walk on any and all surfaces in the game. Gravity be damned. Using your gecko's microscopic toe pad hairs, the world is your ground. You can walk pretty much anywhere, and this is done extremely smoothly with no weird camera whips or cuts. No extra button presses required. All you need to do is walk into a wall and up you go. This unique way of traversing the environment goes a long way in giving the game its own identity. The last time I remember a platformer utilizing an animal's traits in a game this distinctively might be Snake Pass, and that was almost a decade ago. Now you might be thinking, if I can just walk on any surface, where is the challenge in the game? Well, you wouldn't be at fault for thinking this, and if you're looking for an extremely challenging platformer, then this game's not for you. The focus with Gecko Gods is fully on exploration, both with its gameplay and its story, and your ability to go pretty much anywhere is perfect for making the exploration that much more fun and rewarding. When you can pretty much go anywhere, there's a lot more places to explore. On starting the game, you're presented with this gorgeous 2D animated cutscene that more or less sets up the story, and you wash ashore on an island, and you're introduced to the game's mechanics and come across your first major quest, which is to awaken the great water gecko. You then set out on this lush island and wander around aiming to solve some puzzles to fulfill this quest. If you get frustrated with aimlessly wandering around, you can interact with some objects in the central area. Usually there's something you can read, and it'll put a circle on your map and narrow down your search area if you'd like to beeline to the end of the game. I try to use the map as little as possible just because I enjoy traversing the areas in the game so much. At this point, I thought I'd worked out the game's formula. I'd awaken this water gecko, then I'd fast travel to another island, I'd awaken whatever gecko was there, and I'd repeat until the credits rolled. By keeping with its focus on exploration, the game actually proved me wrong and mocked my assumptions by giving you a boat. There's no fast traveling, instead you sail the seas in search of your next objective. While your main objectives usually take place on one of the 3 main islands, you'll find a bunch of smaller islands spread across the sea, all with their own small side quests. I'm not entirely sure if these were optional or not, but I had such a good time with the game that I just ended up naturally completing most of them. If you're more of a fan of the lizard-based gameplay, don't worry, because you'll spend probably over 3/4 of the game on your 4 feet, with just a quarter of the game taking place actually on the boat. With such a focus on exploration and moving around on these islands, the devs have put a lot of effort into keeping it engaging. From the tippy-tappy footprints and footsteps everywhere you walk, to the plethora of collectibles scattered across these islands, you'll rarely find yourself getting bored going around exploring. There's 3 different types of collectibles in the game, the most common one being gems, which you get from breaking vases by bashing your head into them. These gems are used to unlock various skins, all of which look like geckos I've seen in real life. They are very fitting. The 2 other collectibles are less common, with relics usually being hidden or locked behind puzzles, and insects moving around in the areas that you explore, waiting for you to unleash your inner dinosaur. Another thing that helps the exploration feel engaging is the fantastic soundtrack by composer Jasmine Cooper. This is a game that definitely benefits from headphone play. The soundtrack, consisting of various string, wind, and percussion instruments, pairs incredibly well with the visuals and general exploratory feel. This harmony between these elements is something that not a lot of games manage to do this well. Speaking of the visuals, as I'm sure you've seen so far in the video, the game is stunning. There is a focused effort on getting you immersed into the world of the game, from the lush landscapes with swaying foliage, to the equally mesmerizing sunsets and starlit midnight skies. Thanks to the game's day and night cycle, no effort was spared in making every second of this game a treat, both in terms of visual and audio. With such a focus on immersion, you'll have noticed that the game has very minimal UI. With barely any UI for most of the game, things like your gecko's health is indicated by the color of the gecko, with it turning slightly red when you're damaged, and your tail getting shorter when you're closer to dying, which I thought was a really nice touch. Damaging the gecko made me feel really guilty, unlike any other game. It really felt like accidentally stepping on a pet's tail. I mean, look at this thing, how can you not feel bad? The game's story is fairly simple, but it fits with the game's focus on exploration. As you traverse the seas and make your way around these islands, you'll be discovering more and more about an ancient civilization with tombs and secrets in every step. The local avian population will act as your guide through your journey, anointing you as their chosen one and reawakening the Gecko Gods. I don't truly understand the subtleties in the story here, but I do feel like it's all it needs to be in a game like this, a setting for you to want to explore. So, is the game just walking around islands and collecting things? Well, no it's not. Throughout the game, you won't just be using the gecko's mouth to eat insects on these islands, you'll also use it to solve puzzles, by grabbing handles, turning levers, and the sort. On top of the puzzles, there's the occasional combat encounter, which are fairly simple, but help break up the flow every now and then. The reason I've been rambling so much about exploration and immersion is because I really feel like that's the game's core strength. While I do like the puzzles and the combat sequences, I'd usually be thinking, when am I going to get back to the exploring during them? This all brings me to my negatives with the game, the things that stop the game from being a definite recommend. I'll start off with the one issue that I had with the game design-wise, and that was its puzzles. Though like I mentioned, I generally do like the puzzles in the game, there's a fairly extensive sequence halfway through the game where you're pushing around orbs and aligning mirrors. It just kind of drags on for a bit too long. There were multiple times where I thought I'd gotten to the end of the sequence and it just kept on going, and this was compounded by the fact that I got lost a few times and the fact that I ran into a bug that kept me lost for longer than I would have liked. One sequence in the entire game doesn't sound like a big deal, but for a game as compact as this, it kind of feels like it's worth mentioning. Other than that, most of my issues were bugs or bug adjacent. Though the first half of my playthrough was generally smooth sailing, I ran into a lot more bugs in the latter half. Things like walking on ceilings feeling finicky with the gecko falling off seemingly randomly at times, and the left stick movement inverting when it felt like it shouldn't have, though the biggest offender of all was a bug that locked me out of finishing the game. So there's a maze sequence towards the end of the game that has tiles going up and down, and I happened to get crushed by one of these rising tiles, which had me respawn outside of the maze with the tiles still raised, meaning I was literally locked out of finishing the game. I spent far too long trying to get back into the maze through the cracks between the tiles because it was the last thing I had to do before I could reach the final sequence in the game, but I eventually gave up and sent a bug report to the developer and hoped the patch would fix things. Thankfully, the bug was fixed a few days later and I managed to finish the game, but I can't help but feel that it might have subconsciously changed how I felt about the game. I can't remember the last time I got bugged out of finishing a game, and this happening while I was trying to get the review out as soon as possible was not a good combo. Still, though, this is a very complex game and a relatively small team, so I can't really fault the devs too much on this, especially considering they've actively been squashing all these bugs since release. Overall, I had a really good time with Gecko Gods. I played the game for around 6 hours, with 80% of my time on my gaming laptop, which handled the game pretty well, and the other 20% on the Steam Deck. Now, the game is deck verified, but from my experience, it seems to have an unstable frame rate, hovering around 40 to 60, which for a game as focused on immersion and exploration is a killer for me. If the deck's your only option, go ahead, enjoy, but if you have any other options like a PC or a console, I'd suggest doing that. The game's out on Steam, PS5 and Switch for $20. Is it a recommend for me? I think at this point in the video, you'll know if the game's for you or not. The highs for me were really high, and if the game were just that, it'd be an extremely easy recommend for me. But with the bugs and the lull in the middle with the overly long puzzle sequence, it's more of a conditional recommend. If you can ignore the bugs and don't mind the slower parts, I'd recommend getting the game. Otherwise, wait until the bugs are fixed, and they are getting fixed, or get the game when it's on a slight discount. Either way, I do think the game is worth playing. Thanks for watching. Check out the other videos on this channel. I talk about a bunch of platformers. I just recently passed 50 subscribers, which, you know, it's not that big of a number, but it's nice seeing this little community build. I love talking about these games, so leave a comment and let's talk about this game. Bye bye.